The business planning section of the AC9 software is intended to optimize the efficiency of any advisory business by using analytics. The process is started by creating a pro forma for the firm, which will serve as a guideline for production and revenue, liabilities, expenses the company will incur like software and systems, utilities and vendors, rent and insurance, postage and legal, marketing, and payroll and taxes. Once that baseline is established, every expense and revenue will be tracked in the software to provide the business owner with a comprehensive overview of how the business is performing and the ability to identify where problems are, such as inefficient employees or over and underspending on marketing. The performance dashboard that a user will see when logging into the software is driven by this data and the original baseline pro forma. Once all the necessary data is entered, the business owner will easily and quickly be able to check on the vital statistics of the business and make changes where necessary before anything actually becomes a problem. The Forma tab is where the user inputs all of the revenue and expenses the business incurs. Starting at the top of the page, right below the actual Forma tab, the user will notice a line of boxes horizontally across the browser, starting with the box on the left side titled Initial Investment. This is where the user would input the initial investment of the business owner. To the right of that is Total Investment, where an updated total of all dollars put into the business should be kept. Revenue or money generated by the business itself would not be included. These boxes are simply for investors or owner contributions. Investor pool is a percentage of the total equity of the company that investors other than the owner own. In each line below, there is a start date and a duration column. Often, the figures within these two columns are going to be the same for each line, so the two boxes that read Populate All At can be filled with the proper start date and duration to save time. For example, if the user enters 1/1/2015 and 10 in the two boxes I just mentioned, the start date and duration columns will be populated with those numbers for all the lines below, meaning the start date for each line below will be 1/1/2015 or January 1st, 2015, and the duration for each line will be 10 or 10 years. This is especially handy because for each category, like marketing for example, the user will likely add all the specific expenses that fall into that category. So there may be 15 lines under marketing, and each line will be automatically populated to start at January 1st, 2015 and extend for 10 years forward. Likewise, the third Populate All At performs the same function for the growth and inflation rate column below. The user can also click on the Yearly Monthly button to specify whether the pro forma report will be shown in monthly or in annual segments. Below that are the input boxes for production and revenue and expenses. Under each general category, the user can add new fields to identify each specific expense that falls under those general categories. To do this, the user should click the Add New button at the right of each column. Let's take a deeper look at the production category. In this column, the idea is that the user will input an amount per month indicative of gross assets taken in by the firm or production, and input a payout percentage that correlates with the commission in the payout box. There are two ways of making accurate pro forma predictions here, and depending on how your firm does its business, it's easy enough to decide which way applies best. If the user can come up with an accurate aggregate commission rate amongst the products it does business in, and that's usually going to be the case if the advisory firm is selling one or two fixed products with the same commission rate all the time, then that rate can be input in the payout box and total production can be entered under amount per month. Alternatively, the user can input total expected revenue each month under the amount per month and input 100 in the payout box. In this fashion, the user can just use the full amount of gross revenue that is appropriate to expect each month if that information is more accurate. Keep in mind that AUM account is cumulative, so there could very well be a different value for the input every single month. The liabilities columns through payrolls and taxes are going to work exactly the same. The user should select the type of each expense in the drop-down box to the right of the name of that expense. The start date, duration, and growth and inflation rate should already be pre-filled. It makes sense to select a start date at the beginning of the current or the fiscal year, since this document is going to be viewed on an annual basis. Naturally, the amount per month box and the footnote box are going to be different for each column, so that information will need to be entered separately for each box. Footnotes are just an easy way to make a relevant note about the column it pertains to. The bonuses column is only going to apply if your firm pays some type of annual bonus to the employees. Each employee of the firm is going to have a separate column in this section if each employee's bonus is different, which is normally the case. The bonus amounts are calculated in the pro forma by taking a percentage of either total annual revenue of the firm or net annual revenue, depending on which box you select at the gross/net toggle button. So if, for example, an annual bonus of 5% of net annual revenue is paid out to the junior advisor, then net should be the box selected and 5 should be entered in the payout box. As another example, let's assume that a 10% bonus on gross annual revenue is paid out to the senior advisor each year. In the senior advisor column that the user would add, the box will be selected as gross and the number 10 should be input into the payout box. Once all of that information is compiled into the pro forma boxes, the user may hit the View Report button to see the completed pro forma. The next part of the business planning section is Gauge Calibration. The Gauge Calibration tab is where the user can set all of the dashboard gauges limits or minimums and maximums and determine within those limits where the red, yellow, and green parameters will be. These parameters are to be set on a monthly basis. This means that the numbers input for each column need to correspond with monthly expectations. Green is going to resonate with on target or better than average results. Yellow will be slightly below expectations or potentially unprofitable, and red would signify that results are well below pro forma expectations and may or may not indicate a problem in one of the areas that the gauges display. The top box titled Gauges is of course where the user sets the parameters for all of the dashboard gauges, and the lower box titled Indicator Lights is where the user sets the parameters for turning on indicator lights. Let's go through a few of the columns to better help us understand this section. Let's begin with total revenue. Here the user would input the red, yellow, and green parameters that correspond with expected monthly revenue for the business. Let's assume that the business operates with average monthly revenue of $60,000. A reasonable parameter setting would be $0 to $40,000 for the minimum and maximum range of the red, $40,000 to $60,000 for the min and max of the yellow, and $60,000 to $150,000 for the green. As another example, let's take a look at first appointments showed. This is in regards to the number of leads that are converted into having an initial appointment with one of the advisors of the firm each month. Assume that a firm is holding one monthly seminar for direct mail invitees, and when all is said and done, they usually have between 20 or 30 people that show up to the firm every month. So if the firm's expectations are that at least 5 people of those attendees should be closed for a first appointment, then the gauge inputs should reflect that. The gauges might go from 0 to 3 as the red parameter, 3 to 6 as the yellow, and 6 to 15 as the green. A more ambitious business might set 0 to 5 as red, for example, and so on and so forth for the yellow and green parameters. Another point to keep in mind is that red or yellow parameters don't necessarily have to be kept on the gauge. Let's assume that a firm maintains that 5 pieces of business be closed each month. Anything below that would be less than acceptable, and anything meeting that or beyond is fine or better. In this case, the business owner might set his gauges like this on closed won business: 0 to 5 for the red parameter, 5 to 5 for the yellow, and 5 to 15 for the green. In this case, since we put in 5 to 5 for the yellow parameter is just simply not going to appear. The same will apply for the red parameters, in which the user can allow only yellow and green to be on the gauge. Below our gauge parameters, there are the settings for indicator lights. Indicator lights are intended to be much like the check engine